Hello, I'm Riley, and this is the Diegetic Advancement Podcast. Oh boy, it's a late one. I've had a super busy couple of weeks, so I missed the last week and haven't had a whole heap of time this week. Still, I've got an episode for today. Mostly going to be call ins, as I've already recorded those and they're quite long, so I'll try and keep the first part short. I'm going to give a brief talk about turn one of the war game I've been running, and then talk about my first game of DCC with the new group. Lastly, I have some calls from Joe from the Dekahedron Podcast, Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Mirke from Mirke the Meek, and Sam, who's called in before to offer his thoughts on wargaming. Okay, let's jump right into the wargame. Okay, turn one is done. I've sent the after action reports to the players, and orders for turn two are starting to come in. I'm going to talk about some of the highlights and what worked and what didn't. Firstly, I wanted to thank my players, Daniel from Bennett's Keep, Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Mirke from Mirke the Meek, and Bobby, who is a friend of mine, no podcast. Thanks for your efforts in submitting your orders. They've made a fun experience that I wouldn't have got just playing solo, and I appreciate the effort that goes into that. So, highlights. The orders from each player have been quite diverse. Even with a simple premise and army building rules, the tactics of each player have been unique. Some players trying to employ tactics beyond just the simple movement, getting into naming their groups and things like that. That's been fun to see. Secondly, there are a couple of nice narrative skirmishes that emerge from the rules, an ambush gone wrong, numerous fights over resources. What worked well? For the most part, the rules are serving their purpose. I employed the OD&D rules for wilderness encounters, a surprise evasion encounter distance, and they worked well, or not so well for Daniel, whose small force was surprised by a much larger force of Mirke, leading to a skirmish where he was surrounded. The size of the forces and the amount of movement, I think, are good, but there are some little things I'd like to tweak, nothing major. I'd have to poll my players on some stuff, but the orders that are coming in have been easy for me, at least, to plot out and play with, so things appear to be working well. What hasn't worked? While some of the skirmishes, in theory, were interesting, they didn't always play out that way. Often, because of the scenario, there wasn't many interesting tactical decisions for either side to make. For example, Jason's forces were defending a resource that were midway through harvesting from Daniel's forces, and with only a small number of troops, they have to be the ones to gather the resource. They can't really do anything except stand there and wait. I think that could be improved by fleshing out the system for harvesting, the general whole campaign scenario. Um, Something like including a worker unit that does the harvesting and hauling of the resource. That way, the fighting troops have to work out how best to defend them or attack the opponent's workers. Um, there was a clash between Bobby and Daniel later on, which would have benefited from something like that as well. It ended up just being two forces that were similarly sized with similar resources running into each other and not having much to gain for either side. So, um, partly that could just be a general lack of experience from myself on crafting interesting scenarios. So something I'll be doing for the next turn is looking at some of my rule books for inspiration. But if anyone has recommendations on a product which is essentially a big book of wargame scenarios or something like that, that'd be great. All in all, I've had a blast. I'm looking forward to turn two. As I said, this is only going to go 3 turns just because it's a test, and I'd kind of like to iterate on it and improve. I don't want to make any massive changes midway through, so we're just going to play it out as it is. And in the next couple of weeks, I'll get back with another little update. Now, onto my DCC game. Okay, DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics. As I've talked about, I've set up an in person group to play at a local store. I had a lot of success advertising on Facebook, not much anywhere else, and ended up with 8 players interested. Of those 8, 6 confirmed their attendance the week before, and then 2 others, the other 2 I didn't get a response from, and unfortunately I had 2 pull out with sickness the day of. that still left me with 4 players, which is plenty. All mostly new to role-playing games and certainly new to DCC. I also had someone from the store join in, which made it 5. So still good numbers. Of course, I ran a funnel, the hole in the sky, where players are promised to have their fate set right by the lady in blue, strange 7-foot tall lady with a statue for a head, speaking through severed heads which she holds in each hand. She promises to set their fates right if they can just break someone out of another plane of existence. Simple task for a bunch of peasants, right? I had 10 kills out of the total of 20 peasants. Some of them displayed cowardice and hid, and 2 players had to leave early, so that number would have been a bit higher, but a decent fatality rate. And we had some great moments. People falling off an invisible bridge, 300 foot in the air, getting eaten by a well-mannered pumpkin, triggering a trap with a sheep, trading a duck with a crazed dwarf who quickly ate the duck, and jumping off a branch 200 feet in the air to kill a titan with a magic spear, dying in the process, and then being brought back to life at the end by the Wheel of Destiny. I had a ton of fun. The players seemed to as well. Lots of laughs, and people seemed keen for the next game. So, an all-around success. I'll give another update on the next game. Level up to level 1. Still deciding what I'm going to run. Leaning towards Frozen in Time. That has an inbuilt sort of a mechanic in the adventure that lets me put an arbitrary time limit on so I can get it done in a single session. And it shows some of the weird sci-fi elements that can happen in DCC, but in the inspirational literature as well. So that's likely where I'm going to go. But yeah, I'll give another update on the game, which will be in 2 weeks' time. That's it for the main portion of the show. As I said, I haven't had a lot of time, but the calls are going to go on for a while. So let's dive right in. Okay, first up, I've got a email from Joe from the Dekahedron Podcast. I'm going to read through that. Firstly, he talks about hoping I don't mind written feedback. And of course, I don't mind. I will take feedback in any form. If people want to message me on Discord, email, call in, all the details are in the show notes. Love to hear it. And of course, if you don't want to be included in the show but want to reach out, feel free to do that. Just let me know you don't want it included in the show. Anyway, I'll read Joe's email. I very much appreciated episode 7. James, my longtime friend, gaming buddy, and frequent guest on the show, likes to say that I'm all about the numbers. I love probabilities. You were talking about dice pools being unintuitive. If you look at my dice pool mechanic that I came up with for shirts and skirts, episode 108 of my podcast, I feel this one is very intuitive. If you have 1 die, then you have a 50% chance of getting 1 or more success. If you have 3 die, you have a 50% chance of getting 3 or more successes. If you roll 10, you have a 50% chance of getting 10 or more successes. Definitely seems like it will work for the field that I'm looking for in the game. Of course, there's no way to know until I play. Anyway, thanks again for another great episode. Joe. Okay, first off, thanks heaps for the email, Joe. As I said, more than happy to take email feedback. Really great hearing from you. Joe has the fantastic Dekahedron podcast with sometimes guest host James, and he was calling in on episode 7, which was my sort of response to Ivan Mike's series of dice probabilities video. And as he said, I mentioned a dislike that I have for dice pool systems because they're unintuitive to gauge your chance of success. And when I read his method, I at first didn't believe him, and I had listened to the episode, but I normally listen to things like when I'm doing something else, and so sometimes I miss some of these things. And so thanks for pointing it out to me. So I went back and re-listened, and the mechanic is this: so you roll a number of d6, and each of the dice that come up as a 4 or more, you count a success. In addition, those dice then explode so that you roll additional dice. And that, as far as I can tell, is will happen infinitely. Right? So if you roll a 4, then you roll an extra dice because of that, and that scores a 4 or more. You keep rolling until you've only got fails. Okay, so there's a couple of things I really like about this. One, it allows you to succeed more than your number of dice. So let's say you are only rolling one dice. It's a 50% chance of at least one success, but you have a 25% chance of at least two successes and a 12.5% chance of at least three successes. So you can go above and beyond your quote unquote ability, which I quite like. And then the actual stats on that are 50% of zero successes, 25% of one, 12.5 of two, and 12.5 of three. And then, secondly, of course, as Joe says, you have a 50% chance of at least getting as many successes as you have dice. And so, yeah, this is great. It fixes a lot of the unintuitive nature of the dice pool system. It's still hard to estimate. If I've got three dice, what's my odds of getting six successes? What are my odds of getting at least one success? But for the most part, we know that a third level character is going to have a 50% chance against a third level task. And either side of that is going to be more easy or more difficult. So that is a really good system. The only thing is, how does it play out at the table? How many times is the exploding nature easy for the players to roll? But I think it's really great, and that's something I'll definitely be thinking about if I were to design my own system or house rule some sort of dice pool system in, or change a dice pool system. So thank you so much for the email, Joe. All the details to Joe's podcast, the Dekahedron Podcast, will be in the show notes. Next up, I have a call from Jason touching on the rating system and the wargame. Take it away.
Hey Riley, Jason here. Just listened to your latest episode. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't look at it as a us and them kind of thing. We reference the AD&D rating system or any of that. Honestly, we all have slightly different tastes. But like I said over on my show, the thing is, when it comes to rating, you're not doing it what Gygax thinks. It's what the DM thinks, which is what Daniel said. But it's also what the group thinks, and that's something you can set up in session 0. And you don't even have to use it. That's the nice thing with AD&D, the way it's set up, is you don't even have to use that rating system. You can just give everybody the top rating and still use the training rules and do everything. So it's not a big deal. As far as the narrative rating system, or narrative war game goes, I apologize to you for not giving you enough direction for my troops. Everything you said sounds great. I have zero complaints, but I feel like I might be making you work harder than I should have, and I'll give more detailed instructions next time. So again, no complaints at all about how my troops are being handled by you. Just I feel that I probably should have given you more, so I'm creating more work for you, and I apologize about that. But great episode, and I will talk to you soon. I look forward to the next one where you go into details on this turn for the narrative war game. Take care.
Hey Jason, thanks for the call. Yeah, first up, AD&D versus story game rating systems. Yeah, framing it as a us versus them, just a small joke, of course, but you make some great points. I actually read what was in the book on the last episode, which I didn't do on the episode about that. As you mentioned, it's quite flexible, and of course you don't need to do what Gygax says, and of course you can change anything that's in the book or ignore it. And yeah, I think that's the DM's. Obviously, the DM can do that, or they can have a discussion with the group. So, great points there. I think everyone's on the same page with that. If you don't like it, don't use it or change it. On the narrative wargame orders, yeah, don't stress on backing directions for the troops. I'd only ask for the group makeup and directions for their movements. Any extra is fine, of course, and I'm more than happy to fill in the blanks. It is hard because each turn is quite long, and you can't really account for what's going to happen, so I have to make changes on the fly anyway. But yeah, thanks for the call, Jason. All Jason's details will be in the show notes. And next up, I have Mirke calling in on the war game.
Hey Riley, this is Mirke. I enjoyed your last episode. It is interesting hearing everyone's orders for the war game, I almost feel like I'm cheating now or something. But I suppose with this next round, who knows what'll happen. There's still so many things up in the air. So yeah, I'm definitely curious to see where things go. I'm glad that you get to build narratives out of what's going on with all of our choices. This seems like a superior, more fun way to be doing wargaming, having generals behind the scenes making the orders and giving that to, people to run for you. Yeah, it just seems really neat. Well, take care.
Hey, Mac, thanks for the call. Yeah, I went back and forth on whether I should share, and I wouldn't normally, but as I'm effectively running the game as a test, I'm choosing to overshare so I can get some feedback. Each turn is self-contained, so I'm hoping that helps as well. Each turn is going to be starting fresh from your gates, so people's tactics and group makeups are going to be different. So that previous information shouldn't have too big an impact, I'm hoping. On this format being a good way to run war games, yeah, if you can get people to contribute orders, I think it's a great way to play, especially solo. Take that responsibility for making decisions away from yourself. It's kind of like using an oracle, but with with real people. Of course, it's no small commitment for the players that take that general role to provide the orders. Yeah, it's been working well, and I'll be continuing to experiment with this idea. Not that it's mine or original, but we'll see where I end up with it. Thanks for the call, and Merck's details will be in the show notes. And lastly, I've got a long set of calls from Sam, who called in on my original Wargame show. He's got a whole bunch to say. I might jump in the middle of some of the calls to provide my comments, but we'll see how we go. Take it away, Sam.
Hey Riley. One thing you should check out, read up on, or watch some videos about is Kriegspiel, the Prussian military's game for training officers. It can be adapted to any genre, any situation, just using the concepts in it. So I definitely recommend that for campaigning and narrative building. Hopefully you're keeping things double blind with your players. And hopefully you'd already played out what was about to go down, what you described as about to go down in your podcast. Hopefully you played that out before you release the podcast, because you shouldn't let players know things that they wouldn't know in the game. I assume you know that though. Yeah, I guess my main issue with the way you're doing it, like the thing I don't like, is not really actually the points. Like points, of course, they did exist in the 80s, and they can have a purpose, like stopping people from um, bringing ridiculously overpowered things into a game. Um, but so if you're playing with good people though, good dudes, then that shouldn't happen. Like power gamers, I don't understand them. I probably wouldn't hang out with them. But yeah, so there's no real need for points, especially when you're playing a lot of historical stuff or alternate history stuff like I do, where sides aren't always balanced in real life, and different sides can have different goals or different victory conditions. Even though they might be less powerful, they've got different goals. So there's things like that. So the points aren't that bad, but the one thing I really don't like about your setup is the contrived resource collection. Like it's real. Yeah, it's contrived, like Energon in Transformers or something. Like it just seems silly to me, but it doesn't matter what I think. It sounds like you're having some fun. Check out Kriegspiel. You might get some more ideas about how to build narrative or unexpected outcomes, and more fog of war, more chaos. It's always interesting to me. Unexpected outcomes or unexpected results. Another thing you could try is matrix gaming, where you, as a GM, set a list of words or phrases that players can draw from to phrase narrative arguments of things that should happen. And then you, as GM, assign a difficulty rating based on how strong their argument is, and your knowledge of the world, and then roll for it. And if it happens, you can also assign degrees of success. How much does that thing happen? And in a potential battle situation, a failure on your roll could lead to playing out a tactical miniatures battle. Yeah, so anyway, matrix gaming, check that out. It might be of interest to add a bit more, like chaos, fog of war, and interesting developments to your story. For a good article on matrix gaming, I was going through some of my old wargame magazines, and Miniature Wargames, March 1997, a UK magazine, had a good article on matrix gaming, and it's even in a fantasy setting, and it gives some pretty good examples. So maybe that's on archive.org or something, or you can find a copy.
Okay, thanks, Sam, for the call. A couple of things I'll touch on. Firstly, I'll just talk about my narrative war game, and then I'll go on to some of his recommendations. The double blind thing, yeah, totally get that. I had played everything out, and as I mentioned in Merc's call, I'm not as concerned with oversharing at this stage. Really, just trying to get the information out there, get feedback. But yeah, that information probably could be useful, but it's not directly impactful to the orders as they're sort of resetting. On points, I don't see how I could use a different system very easily. Totally get it for recreating historical battles and things like that. You've got a frame of reference to generate your army lists, right? Whereas this, I don't have that frame of reference. It's fantasy, so points I think is a good stand-in. And the scenario, yep, totally contrived. I'm not sure how best to frame the scenario otherwise. I wanted a simple setup that gives the players a reason to act and a reason for the conflicts to occur, and resource collection is just a simple and easy way to do that in my mind. Right, the players who are giving the orders know, right, my optimal way to move is go between the nodes, pick things up, and then when I have a conflict, I know that their reason for their fighting is to remove the resources from the other team. So I get totally contrived. It'd be better with a better scenario for sure, but simple, quick was my goal there. Okay, 2 recommendations. Kriegspiel. I'm familiar with the term, though mainly through the RPG lens, which is the free Kriegspiel revival style or type of game, FKR. And I guess through that I know a little bit of the history where Kriegspiel was fairly freeform, relying on an experienced referee, and then developed into having too many rules. And so then you have free Kriegspiel where they go back to the sort of roots. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's certainly what we're sold when we look at the RPG usage of the term. That's how I like to play my RPGs anyway, sort of relying on GM and group fiat to just adjudicate things logically using common sense. But I haven't got much experience or exposure to it, or how that works as a war game. So I'll definitely check out some stuff on that. And secondly, Matrix Gaming. Not something I'd ever heard of, and I'd done a little bit of Googling and some preliminary reading. It sounds really interesting. I've included some links in the show notes, and I actually picked up a copy of the magazine that you specifically mentioned, which is Miniature Wargaming issue 166, I believe. I picked that up for maybe $10 on eBay, so I'll see what I think of it when it arrives. I couldn't find it online. I think the title of the section that you're referring to is an alternative campaign system for fantasy games. That certainly sounds interesting, especially with what I've seen from Matrix Gaming. Looks like, again, if I wanted to learn more, I should pick up another book by John Curry. He has the Matrix Games Handbook. I've read Ancient Wargaming from him, and I've got just arrived the Old West Skirmish Wargames, Wargaming Western Gunfights, edited by John Curry, an old 1970s Western rule set that I sort of heard about from looking into Braunstein, and that popped up on the Audio Dungeon Discord just today. So I might record some of my thoughts on that and this Matrix Gaming book article when I receive it. Anyway, thanks heaps, Sam, for the calls. I think there's some questions in the main part of this show that I won't ask again here, but I'm really enjoying your contributions to this show. So thank you. Okay, if you've survived this long, well done. Thank you for listening to the show. As always, callers and things I've talked about will be in the show notes. And if you'd like to call in, my details for that will be in the show notes as well. Discord, email, SpeakPipe. I think I'm going to take a page out of Merck's book and split my episodes up into call-ins and regular shows, at least when I'm lucky enough to get call-ins, just because I did like trying to keep my episodes to a short length. Responding to calls just takes me a long time. So in the future, I think that's what I'll be aiming to do. Of course, if I only got one call, I might just include that. Next week, I'm likely going to start to talk about the name of the show, Diegetic Advancement. Start a conversation around that. Won't be anything to update on my war game or my DCC game, very likely, so that will be the main part of the show. Anyway, thanks for listening, and bye for now.